Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Bullets and Bourbon. I'm Matt Gunlock, and I'm joined by Adam Majors as my guest co host. Tonight, we have a very special guest, Karl Marlantes. Karl is a Vietnam veteran serving in the Marines as a platoon commander. He is also a best selling author, writing both Matterhorn and What It's Like to Go to War. Karl is an advocate for the veteran community and has helped many get the help that they need. Before I go any further, Karl, can you just give yourself a quick introduction?
Sure. Yeah. Um, well, grew up on the Oregon coast in a little logging town. It was called Seaside. Uh, Very innovative to name it Seaside since it was next to the ocean. And a little high school, 400 kids, six of whom died in that war. So out of 200 boys, we lost six. And joined the Marines when I was 18 because it's sort of a funny story. How much time have we got to do these sea stories? But
As long as you need.
all right, the thing is that this little town of mine, uh, all the football players went down to join the Marines, and it was pretty simple. Why? Because guys would disappear and go to some place called San Diego and come back with something we never saw in Oregon, which is a suntan. And but they would swagger up and down the main street of town. I mean, I swear they were 4 inches larger in the shoulders, and it was just like, fuck, I want some of that. Whatever that is, I want some of that. And there was also the draft. I mean, it was hanging over our heads all the time, which your generation hasn't had to deal with. So it was like, well, if you don't join the Navy or the Air Force or the Marines, you're going to get in the Army. Some people were heading for the Coast and Geodetic Survey when the war broke out, but it was so all that combination of and everybody's. My dad was World War II veteran. My uncles were, so it was really different, sort of zeitgeist at the time. I went up to the Marine recruiter and I said, well, I know what the Marines do. I've seen the sands of Iwo Jima with John Wayne. I know that they invade bases and stuff. And I said, but what else do they do? And he looks at me and he says, well, we guard all the embassies. All right, here's 18-year-old Karl going. I go, wow, mean like in Paris? He said, sure. And so I swear to God, I remember this so clearly. My brain, I went, well, the odds aren't how you get Paris, but surely Madrid or Rome. Sign me up. So I joined the PLC program and went to Yale and went to Quantico and Summers and to sort of, it's boot camp. That's all it is. And then, when I got my commission in '67, I had gotten the Rhodes Scholarship. And so I thought I'd never be able to go. Wrote a letter to the Marine Corps and they wrote back somebody and said, great, go ahead. We're proud of you. We'll catch you later. So I was then put on inactive reserve status and I reported to some Navy base in London or Navy office. And, but I felt bad. Like I said, six of my friends were killed there and, guys that I gone to PLC with were already shipping over there and there I was having a good time, with the girls and drinking beer and I thought the war was. I didn't like the war was a mess by that time. It was quite clear to me that we don't know what we're doing there, and but I was already in, so it was like desertion or go because I couldn't stay there because I just felt I was hiding behind the privilege of the scholarship. Um, and so after, some turmoil, which is I reflect in one of my books, I um, decided to go and I wrote a letter to the Marines. And I think within 3 days I was on an airplane
Wow.
heading for Quantico.
No,
So that's
that's
the
that's
background.
pretty cool. No, I appreciate that, and I think it brings a lot of perspective in because, you know, not many people, in my opinion, you had the Rhodes Scholarship, you were told, yeah, do your thing. Not a lot of people would have chosen the path you took to say, I'm gonna go do my duty. You
Yeah.
know, and
I'll,
it's that's pretty powerful.
Thank you. I'll tell you another great story about that. So after I'd been in with my platoon about, 3 or 4 weeks, and they they realized they could talk to me. I was human. Uh, Joe Flaherty, who was a 20-year-old squad leader, uh, Lance Corporal, and we come back from just a beat up patrol, no action, but we were tired, rain pouring down, dripping, and we got inside the wire, and he comes up to me and he says, "Sir," he says, "are they shitting us about you going to Yale and being a Rhodes Scholar?" And I said, "No, Flag, they're not shitting you." "Well, you must be the dumbest fucking Rhodes Scholar on record."
You know, I had a good friend of mine. I'm not going to name his name, but he was an enlisted guy. He got the Silver Star. Him and I were we were combat instructors together. And then he went off to his next unit once our time was up over at infantry school. And next thing I find out, he's going. He got accepted to the MECEP program, and so he's going to be a commissioned officer. And so we're talking one day on the phone. And I'm like. Uh, you know, you're a smart dude. I mean, I know you didn't choose to go back to the infantry or anything like that. You probably. I'm assuming you went like logistics, something that you could use after the Marine Corps or Intel or something like that. He's like, nope. I'm not going back to the ground infantry, but I'm going to be an AAV officer. I was like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Like, come on, man. Like you've been doing this shit too long. But he's doing good for himself. He's getting ready to retire pretty soon here, from what I heard.
Oh, okay.
But
It's
so
it's
go
yeah, I was
on.
just gonna say it's meaningful here that as we're just diving in, the one of the things that's coming up is the ways in which our sense of duty and that call to adventure uh, sets us up for things that are very difficult, and yet the difficulty is not really a factor that we're weighing as heavily as the sense of duty. And that's important, I think, just because at the end of the day, you know all of us have decided to do this, um, despite the fact that on some level we know it's going to leave a mark, you
Hmm.
know?
Well,
Yeah.
my parents, growing up, I knew I was going to join the military at a very young age. And from a very young age, my parents always told me, my mom always told me, you can go to any branch of service you want, you're just not going to the Marines.
Hmm.
So of
And
course.
then, and then what do I do? Do
Yeah.
the complete opposite.
Well, all three of us are gluttons for punishment, I suppose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh.
I wouldn't change it for the world. Best thing that could have happened to me.
Yeah.
But to kind of start diving in, going to war is obviously a life-changing event, and platoon commanders rely on the experience and knowledge that those who have experienced combat to lead them. And the role of the platoon sergeant is just that. It's a senior tactical advisor to the platoon commander. So, how would you describe your relationship with your platoon sergeant, and how did you two create that balance when leading Marines in combat?
Yeah. The First of all, you got to understand the way that we operated. We were about 25 kilometers from battalion headquarters, completely on our own, a company, Charlie Company, and we ran patrols. We would get up on top of a hill and make a defense, and sometimes we'd turn it into a fire base. But we always had two patrols. If you're a platoon, two
Hmm.
two squads out, one squad back. And so Gunny, he later became a Gunny. I call him Gunny Ring now, but he was a staff sergeant then. Uh, we, I would take one squad out. He'd take the other squad out, and the squad leader was in charge. But it was quite clear that, if we wanted to override what he was doing, we could. But Ring and I went out every day on a patrol, and so we basically split the job. Same with night radio watches. We just split it up 50-50, and along with our radio operators. So that was one thing that was I think probably different because our operation was spread out. The squad size, and um, it was just a way that we could sort of handle it. Um, he hadn't had any prior combat experience. This was 1968, 8, and
How old was he relative to you, Carl, at the time?
oh, this is what's so funny. I thought he was a father figure,
Hmm.
and he was 28.
Wow. And
Yeah,
you're
I mean,
you're like
he
what,
was.
23?
I had turned 23. Yeah, he and that's one of the things that was really interesting is that we were so young, and I think that's changed. One day I was just bored, and so I started looking at all the birth dates of the guys in the platoon, and the average age, I just averaged it up, was 18 and 10 months.
Oh
Wow.
wow.
They get out of high school when they're 17 or 18, and most, for some reason, the spring of that year is where a lot of birthdays are. Then they go to boot camp and they go to ITR and then they're in Vietnam. I mean, there you are,
So,
and
so you were one of the old guys.
I was an old guy. In fact, I was at a Charlie Company reunion, and I said, "God, you must have. I must have been like a big brother to you guys." And two of these guys I talking about broke out laughing. Said, "You were a father figure."
Wow.
So I assume Steph's Sergeant Ring had probably been in close to 10 years at that point.
That's right. Yeah, he was in about, and he was, what everybody called a lifer,
Hmm.
and he was old core, and one of the things that I let him do, he seemed to like like doing it, is he would be the guy that'd go around, and if somebody was starting to look sloppy, he'd get on their case. He was no martinet, but if somebody just started to be looking a little bit shaggy, or hadn't managed to get a clean pair of socks in 4 weeks, that kind of, I kind of let him do that because he was just sort of more, well, he's enlisted,
Good
and
order and discipline type of guy.
yeah, that's what he did, and he was also good at that. Um, he was a bit of a racist. He was from the South. And in those days, in 67, 68, 69, uh, I was at West Point, and a general criticized me. He said, "We didn't have any racism like that in the Army." He was talking about Matterhorn. And I said, "Yeah, we didn't have any racism in the United States either because no one knew it." It was just that bad. I
Yeah.
said, "Yeah." But he was a good guy, and he became a gunny meritorious. He was offered a Bronze Star or the extra pay. He turned the Bronze Star down to take meritorious promotion to gunny,
Hmm.
and I think he retired as a first sergeant. He's now dead. Miss
Hmm.
him. Yeah. So,
Were you guys close when you were in Vietnam? Did you get along pretty
well,
well?
yeah, we were close. God, you sleep practically with each other. I mean, he had a radio and I had a radio, and so his hooch was just. We split them apart because of shelling. We wanted to make sure that, and also anytime we'd be on a platoon size operation, I'd be up on point and not right on point. I always walk three behind. He would always be tail end Charlie, so that we didn't. So we just worked it out that way, and he was the one that kicked butts if guys started flagging, on the operation, because he was in the back end, and so we did it that way. But um, he was so much older than me. It
Hmm.
was it was just sort of interesting. I mean, it's like hard to become buddies with somebody who's your father, and I look back on it now, that's just the way it was. And he and the other staff sergeants, they buddied around. I mean, they were the peers, and I was with these 22, 23-year-old second lieutenants, and so that was our peer group, and everybody got along fine. I mean, like I said, you were in real close quarters. I mean, we shared hooches and you know, everything. But I think it was the age difference.
Hmm.
Did you
Important.
guys do like work, like did you fly straight over there and meet up with them there, or did you guys do a workup? Like, did you go out there to California, meet up with your unit, and then do a workup?
Nope. You just went up there and you replaced whoever was shot. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's one of the things that if any young officers are watching this, is unbelievable, but I tell you it's true. When the new lieutenant or the new sergeant shows up, they've got about 60 seconds before the squad or the platoon decides whether they're good or bad.
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
mean, I can't tell you what that is, but within a minute, there's this sort of like, okay, he'll work, or
Mhm.
fuck, what have they sent us, and it's so critical that you just are relaxed and you're yourself, you're open, because that's the only way that you're going to get these guys to. And when you're in combat, they know their life is in your hands.
Right.
They are going to be extraordinarily careful, and
Yeah.
I have a great story about that. Is that we got a guy from a motor transport company, and because he was, um, there was a general named Davis who thought that every Marine lieutenant should be a rifle platoon commander, no matter what their MOS. And I mean, '03 is sort of the top of the line. It was back in the '60s anyway.
Yeah.
And so if you didn't make it, then you went someplace else. And no shame on that. I mean, shit, you need trucks, right? But
Hmm.
he wasn't cut out to be a infantry platoon commander. They landed him just on an op, and he got it. We'd cut an LZ. And he comes off this LZ, and he looks sort of doofus, and we'd lost a lieutenant, so he goes to replace him, and we're about the next day we're on an op, and the skipper calls up, who was by the way 23, the first lieutenant, and he asked for two actual. And there's this sort of pause, and the radio operator, well, where's your actual? So the skipper calls me. He says, Marlantes, I was the XO at this time. Get up there and find out what the fuck's going on, So I get up to the top. There's the radio operator uh, with the platoon sergeant. I said, well, where's the lieutenant? Well, he's back in the rear. What in the middle of the platoon? So I walk back there, and there he is, doofus, and I said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Well, Sergeant Lonnie told me this is where I'm supposed to be." You
Oh
know,
no.
we literally called an emergency medevac. The last I saw of this guy was he was in a donut being hauled up through the jungle trees, and I don't fault him at all. The fucking general who said everybody's going to be a platoon commander was just wrong. That's not
Right.
true,
Right.
And
Yeah. I agree with that completely. And I think
yeah,
that to this day, it's something we still need to remedy.
yeah.
Yeah. That, and it's something I think about in this, the therapist in me, uh, as I'm reading these things as you're sharing the story and kind of interpreting it on my own level here. And I was thinking about how important it is in terms of like communication and that first impression. But within the realm of depth psychology, we talk about how we're always in communication on four levels. You've got your conscious personality to my conscious personality, like my ego to your ego. But then my conscious personality is saying things, and your unconscious is picking it up, and then
Mm-hmm.
you're saying things and my unconscious is picking it up, and then my unconscious and your unconscious are in dialogue too.
Wow.
And we're reading all these things that we can't even really put our finger on, but you walk away from something and you're like, there's something I just don't like about that guy. Or you experience someone and you're like, man, that guy's a badass. I'll go with him anywhere. And it's those little bitty things that you can't even put your finger on tell you a whole lot. But I think at the end of the day, like for me as a guy who went to war as a lower enlisted guy as an E4, I mean, really, all you want to know is that you're going to be safe, and that you're going to be okay, and you and your buddies are going to get home. And so much of that is coming from competence and from knowing what kind of leaders you're with. And if your leaders are guys that seem competent and like, they're going to be able to walk through a fire with you, it's easy to
Yeah.
go wherever they tell you to go. But if you don't trust them,
Yeah,
it's
and it's
tough.
uncanny how those decisions are made, but I think that's what it is. It's the unconscious of all these, 19-year-olds just says, I can work with this guy, or I can't. There's no conscious, well, I
Right.
don't like the way he, cuts his hair. It's that isn't where it comes from. I don't know. It might even come from just the old hunting groups. I mean, somebody once said that the squad was the size of the old original when we were all running around in moccasins hunting groups, and no, the fire teams, and that you have to have a leader that you have to be quiet. You can't talk. You can't argue back. You have to be able to, and it's probably the guys that survived have the genetic makeup to first of all know who they're going to put their in trust in. And I just think it's that deep. It's just it's 200,000 years of evolution,
Yeah.
you know.
Do you ever
Uh,
feel that some of the senior guys who had been there for a while didn't make friends easy with like the combat replacements or didn't want to make friends with the combat replacements?
um, you know, it there was probably about a 8 or 10 day trial period, and the
And
first
I
firefight.
ask in the light of, you've already seen a lot of your friends wounded or killed
Mhm.
leaving, and you just didn't want to make that human connection anymore because you didn't want to go through the pain of
I've
losing somebody else.
Yeah, I've heard that that happens, but it wasn't prevalent in the company. Um, like I said, that he sort of, well, I don't know if this how this guy's going to be, but as soon as there was a firefight, there then you were no longer a new guy.
Hmm.
You were
You're
just,
battle hardened.
yeah, you're no longer a new guy, and so you're just accepted. And it didn't take long because we'd have a firefight, every 10 or 12 days, and so that you could sort of just meld in. But I've heard about that you don't want to lose friends. Um, it didn't occur to me. I made friends fast, and most of the guys in the platoon. I don't think I remember anybody being isolated.
Hmm.
Um, just didn't work that way.
No. So kind of moving along, and it goes into you receiving your Navy Cross and your Bronze Star with V, which are two of the highest awards that are given out. Earning those awards can be a life changing in and of itself, and if you make a career out of the Marines, those would set you up for the rest of your life. But did you ever feel that those awards would be the only thing that you would be known for, and that people wouldn't actually know you just for you, and people wouldn't wait in a way would just label you, and you couldn't get past that? And I kind of also asked this in the light of, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's a sergeant major, and he's been a guest, Chris Singley, and um, you know, those events that you earn those awards in, like those are some of the most ferocious fighting and events that you've ever had in your life. And that would almost, in a sense, be the pinnacle of the most badass thing that you have ever done in your life. So where do you go from there?
Yeah, no, I think it's uh, one of the problems of coming back is that sense of you know life at its fullest, and that and uh, I'm trying to think about, like the Navy Cross, which is a big deal. I mean, I can go to any Navy base or Marine Corps base and get free beer, but um, the thing is a couple of things. One is that I got out, and my generation has no fucking idea what a Navy Cross is. They don't know what a Bronze Star is. I mean, and so I didn't have that issue. And the other thing was I never told anybody, because we were so badly received. And I can remember I finally got up enough courage to tell a girl that it's in my book. I told her that I was a Marine and come back from Vietnam, and we were sitting at the bottom of the stairs to her flat. And she stood up and just bolted up, and she said, "Oh my God, they're the worst." And she went running up the stairs, never saw her again. So you can imagine that you're not going to talk about your medals. Uh, Mine just stayed in the drawer of the office in my house for 20 years. It wasn't until probably uh, the early 90s or something like that. Uh, Late 90s, that my father, who was a World War II veteran, just went and got him and put him in a shadow box and gave it to me for Christmas.
Wow.
So I put him up on the wall. Started to finally come to terms with what was, in fact, I think, the worst thing about the Vietnam War was coming back, because you were just vilified, and and it was so unfair. I mean, it's not like, your basic 19-year-old Lance Corporal did American foreign policy, I mean, it's just we were just doing our job. And it, so then and when that shadow box came back, I started owning that I'd earned those medals. And the other thing that I've come to think about them, is that, in high school football, in the local newspaper, the halfback always gets the credit for making the touchdown. But any decent guy knows he couldn't have made it without the line. It just wouldn't have worked. And so when I saw guys, like the Vietnam veterans against the war throwing their medals away and stuff, I couldn't do it because I didn't feel it was like my medal. It was like I was the one that got the headline, but shit, I wasn't up on that hill all by myself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had a whole bunch of people with me, and they just didn't get the headline. So I kind of look at the medal like it's
It's a
theirs as
representation of
well as
them.
mine. And that helped me. I mean, it sort of got me. It's like it didn't go to my head. First of all, because I was afraid to show anybody, and then after that, I got old enough to realize that, like that analogy of the high school football team, the asshole takes credit for it, but everybody on the team knows it. If the hole hadn't opened, he wouldn't have made the touchdown.
Yeah,
Yeah, Carl,
no.
that story you just related to about not talking about the medal brought me back to the Vietnam War series on PBS, and they actually start that whole series with you telling the story about how when you came home, you and your wife had some friends, another couple, and that it was 12 years into the relationship when the wives were talking that they learned that, both of you guys were Marines who'd served in Vietnam. And when I heard that, I mean, even everything I know about you, having read your books and, followed and learned as much as I could about Vietnam from reading books and stuff, hearing that story shocked me. And I think that's one of the things that's just such a big difference from our generation today, because I don't think there's too many veterans out there that are, completely hiding their service. And I'm wondering what it's like for you to have witnessed such a profound transformation just in the culture from Vietnam to today.
Well, me and my Vietnam buddies have to admit we're a little bit sort of, what's the right word, envious, and because the reception is, of course, totally different. Um, I think that it's in some ways it's gone overboard. I mean, it's like,
Agreed.
I mean, if you ran the bowling alley at Kandahar Air Base, then you're a hero, right? I mean, let's face it. I mean, what is it? Even the Marines, which is a very sort of, combat oriented unit. I mean, what is it? The O3s are like 11%. I mean, it's a tiny majority or tiny minority. Um, and this sort of like thank you for your service. I cringe when I hear that. I mean, it's just it's sort of like it went too far. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
huh? I mean, we don't know what the fuck I did,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
and I may have honorably served as running the bowling alley. I mean, shit, especially the Air Force, you got to have bowling alleys. It's just part of the deal, and you did your job, but
Hmm.
I don't think you deserve no anybody deserves to have people clap at the airport for you.
Right.
It's
Right.
just like that'd be embarrassing to me.
Yeah.
But so you guys
It's
did that. You had to
I was
deal
I
with
was
that.
I was out shopping one day, and some lady just randomly came up to me and was like, "Hey, I just wanted to come up and thank you for your service." And I just kind of gave her this look, and I'm just like, "You're welcome."
Yep.
It's like I don't know how to respond to that. It's like
Yep.
it, I'm doing my job,
Yep.
Yeah.
that's all I'm doing, and no disrespect toward her or anything, but it's
No,
like
she tried to do. She
what
was
she
trying to
thought
be
was,
nice. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And it's like I just didn't know how to respond, and I don't want any accolades or
Yeah.
congratulations for doing something that I love to do. As much as I say it, like the Marine Corps was very much a love-hate relationship through a 20-year career.
Yeah.
There's aspects of it that you absolutely love, and there's parts of it that you hated. And it's really the people that you remember and you love and you reminisce about
Yeah.
that helped you get through it.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think about this like thank you for your service that is problematical, and this is why it's because they don't treat you as an individual.
Hmm.
And the issue for returning veterans getting out of the military, whether you're a combat veteran or not, is returning to the larger community.
Hmm.
And if someone looks at you and says, "Oh, that's a veteran," instead of "that's John,"
Yeah.
uh,
They
then
label
you're
you.
automatically not in the community.
Yeah.
And it works both ways because I know a lot of guys that have got chips on their shoulders.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, you don't know what the fuck I've been through. Well, you're never going to join the community that way either. So they're afraid to talk to you
Hmm.
and they're looking at you like just like you're just some subset of the community. And then the veterans are there with chips on their shoulder. You're never going to come home that way. You gotta just well, John, I understand you were a Marine. Where were you serving? How old were you when you joined? I mean, what did you eat for breakfast? I mean, those are questions that should be asked by the civilians. And the guy who's on the other end of it should be doing a normal conversation. Oh, how did you know that I was in the military? I'm not wearing any. I mean, stuff like that.
Right.
You can't treat people as a class of people, as a group.
Mm.
Otherwise, you don't come back to community. And I think that that's been a big problem with this group of veterans from 2000 on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I, I won't disagree. One of the other, things that just remind me of like I know I told you a few days ago I was on the Marine Corps shooting team. And you know, we would go out to civilian competitions, and I had a rule with my Marines. I was like, when we're here at this shooting competition, you will call me by my first name. And at first they were like, what? Why? I was like, just call me by my first name. And because what would happen is if they started calling me Gunny, all the civilians on the squad would start calling me Gunny. And
Uh,
then and it would carry over because once they know who I am, because I'm wearing a Marine Corps jersey, and everybody
sure.
in the three gun community knew who I was. So like, I have a bunch of civilians calling me Gunny now, and it's like no disrespect to you, but you don't know me as a Gunny. You
Yeah.
don't, you weren't with me throughout my career as I rose, and earned each rank. It's like like call me Matt. I'm a human
Yeah.
being like everybody else. Yes, I'm serving, in the military, but and even now that I'm retired, there's still some people out there that call me Gunny. For Marines that do it, okay, that's fine. I'm
Yeah.
I'm okay with that, but it's like, hey man, like that's a past life. I'm Matt now.
Yeah.
Like I have a
Well,
life outside of the military. I have a personality. I want to move on.
it's also a sign of respect from other
From
Marines,
Yeah,
and you earn that. And if people like you, they call you Gunny because it's like you're hot shit. You're Gunny, And but that only means something if the person who's saying it understands everything that went into being a gunnery sergeant,
yeah,
and a civilian doesn't, and so
Right.
then it feels kind of just flippant or yeah, again, just I don't know what the right word is, shallow.
yeah.
So I kind of agree with you. It's like, no, I mean, Marines can call you gunny, but I don't
Hmm.
think other people should.
One of my closest friends, um, he did 15, 16 years and just got out. Like, and he was a gunny when he got out. He had a few more years to go across the
Yeah,
finish line, but he had his reasons. He decided to get out. And he met his girlfriend, who then became his wife, and like she tried calling him Gunny one day, and he's like, "Nope, you don't rate. You didn't know me
yeah,
as a Gunny. You don't
yeah,
rate that."
yeah.
And
That's it.
so
You don't
she,
rate. Yeah,
yeah, so
yeah,
she never called him Gunny ever again.
yeah, yeah.
Carl,
But
I think there's a lot of GWAT veterans that I think would agree with the coming home thing being the worst part. And Leo Jenkins' book, Ranger Regiment Medic, wrote on assimilation, and he revised it. And the most recent version of it, it's a work of art. But I think for anybody out there who doesn't understand the hardships of homecoming, that book is one of the must reads. But
Really, yeah,
here's a guy who's an elite warrior, served in Iraq and Afghanistan, been through all this stuff. He has so many skills and so much talent to offer, like many veterans. And he came home, and everybody's saying thank you for your service. There's all of these ticker tape parades, and all of the essentially hollow gestures, showing appreciation for service. And yet, somebody like Leo and many, many other veterans never really get a fair shot to prove what they're capable of in the civilian world. And
Yeah,
I think that that's something that, to this day, I see veterans and talk to veterans all the time who have a hell of a time finding their way, because a lot of people, look at, that service history on your resume, and immediately all of those negative projections come with it.
yeah,
That we are, we're either good boy heroes or bad boy veterans,
right,
and there's
exactly.
not a lot of in between.
Well, didn't I think Leo left the country? He lives in Mexico now, right?
He
Yeah,
did. Yeah, he did.
he's a good writer. He's a really good writer. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
good.
and well, there's a couple different things that I think of in terms of that, and I know we're kind of getting off topic here, but so I volunteer with an organization called Four Block, which General Gray, he came up with the three blocks of war, and the gentleman Mike, he started the nonprofit organization called Four Block, Mike Abrams, and the fourth block of war is the homecoming, the you're leaving the military service and finding a meaningful career, as you move on with your life. And one of the things I've noticed, like, and I've only been out for 2 years, but there's a lot of veterans out there that do have that chip on the shoulder attitude of, oh, well, I served in the military, you should just hand me a job. And so they don't necessarily know how to market themselves.
Right.
Yeah,
And one thing that Four Block does really good at is it helps you build your network. It helps you showcase the skills that you have achieved and have earned, all the soft skills that you have, and even some of the hard skills that you've accomplished while serving in the military. And so one thing I think that veterans need to get over is, yeah, you served your country, you volunteered. Don't hold that over everybody else's head when you're trying to get a job.
right.
You need to learn how to market those skills at the same time. So I'm
Yeah,
not trying to be contradictory to what Leo
No,
is saying,
yeah,
but what I'm trying to state a fact that you're a human being just like everybody else. Everybody's looking for a job. You just need to know how to market yourself for the line of work that you're trying to get into.
yeah. What I tell some of these guys when I talk to them about chips on their shoulder, I say, look, uh, well, they don't know what I've been through. I said, if half the human race, the women, had that same attitude, the race would die out because we'll never know what childbirth is like. We'll never know, and yet they still talk to us, and it's there's no chip on their shoulder because of that. Maybe some of them have it, but I said, just think about that. That's the way it has to be. Yeah, you had an experience that very few other people have experienced.
Hmm.
Good. That's special. That's different. But
Learn
you're
from
not
it.
better than they are.
Yeah.
you know?
What did you learn from that, and how did it shape your life?
Yeah. Well, there you had asked that question. I just move into it about we've been at war that, quite frankly, ever since Vietnam, maybe since Korea, that has not been one fighting for our values.
Hmm.
And I'm talking about the initial, you know, documents of the founders, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. We went astray, and we've been involved in wars that you can justify on. Well, I mean, I think that the balance of power. I mean, all that stuff, but it doesn't ring true. And so where's the meaning?
Hmm.
And the you can't find the meaning in the justification of the Afghan war. Uh, you, you can't find it in Vietnam. Christ, I was just in Vietnam in September, and uh, I mean, McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chickens and Honda dealerships. I mean, it's just they went capitalist up to a point. It's a corrupt government, and so if they just take their 10% of your business, but it's booming. It's really booming. And I said, why did we fight a war for? And it was a mistake. I don't think that it was a conspiracy. I think they thought that Ho Chi Minh was a evil communist dictator coming to conquer the world. Well, they all fought Tojo and and Hitler and Mussolini. So that group of leaders sort of just used the same analogy. It was wrong. But where's the meaning? And the meaning is, it hit me. This is the story that where I finally got this right. I went to my old high school, and they had me, talk to the student body. Local boy makes good, and a girl in the student body stood up and she said, "Would you do it again? If you know everything you know now, would you do it again?" And I was, out of the mouths of babes and sucklings, I was like, wow, wow. What do I say about that? And what I said, and I believe it, is I would, because who I am is incredibly influenced by my experiences in war. And I like who I am. I like who I am. And so, without that being part of me, I wouldn't be me, the me that I like. And there's parts of me I don't like, but basically, I would do it again. But then the irony is, of course, the only way you can do it again is if you don't know if you'll come back alive or not. So,
Mm-hmm.
but the meaning is in your development. The meaning is in your. You can use something like soul. I mean, do you mature? Do you reach toward wholeness? Do you and you can get those kinds of experiences out of warfare and combat, and you reflect on it and you grow. If you're doing it right, and you make that meaning. You don't find it.
Mm-hmm.
You make it, the meaning is in your friends. I mean, I made friends that are just unbelievable friends because of what we went through together, and there's meaning in that. But I don't find any meaning in, well, we whooped communism. Well, actually, we lost the war, so we didn't whoop communism. But
Yeah.
and so when people say, what's the meaning? Don't look for it in politics,
Yeah.
just or history. Look
Right.
Yeah.
for it in yourself.
Yep. There's a famous Jungian analyst who passed away several years ago, but his name was James Hillman. And James Hillman actually was a corpsman who served stateside during World War II. So when guys would come home after being severely wounded, uh, James was one of those medics that was taking care of them. And the war definitely left a mark on him, but he wrote a really powerful book called A Terrible Love of War. A Terrible Love of War. Excuse me. And it's one of the most powerful books on war I've ever read. And it's pretty short and sweet, actually. But, it's a mile deep. And one of the things he says is that war is archetypal. It's archetypal. And as long as there are gods, as long as there are archetypes, as long, we're human. And it's part of the human experience. And it's not abnormal, it's normal. And it's normal because it's so ubiquitous. You can't look anywhere in history, you can't look at any culture and find a place or a time when there's not war. It's just part of us. And, from this Jungian perspective, right, when we're considering archetypes, there's all kinds of archetypes. You look at the Greek pantheon, you can look at Aphrodite, or you could look at Hera, or Zeus, or Poseidon, or Ares. And that any archetype is a doorway to what Jungians would call the self and religious people would call God. And I think that all of us, we've been marked by Aries or Mars or, whatever you want to call that archetypal thing is that takes us to war. We were all marked by it. And that for us, that's the doorway to the self. Other people might have been marked by Aphrodite, but, the reality is there's diversity in the psyche. And I think it was Rumi that said, uh, in the broken places is where the light enters you or something like that.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
did he say that? Do you remember?
I wish I could remember, but I know the passage. It's like that's how the light gets through, or something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and that like being wounded by war. I mean, war is, man, if I had to go back to war today, it'd be tough with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old here now. I'd have a hell of a time leaving them. but if I could rewind time, I'd do it all over again too. If I could go back and be 20, 21 years old and go back to Iraq, I'd do it in a heartbeat. But yeah, I would not have come to find myself, you know, without something so terrible.
Yeah, yeah. And so, how do you explain this to people who haven't done it? I mean, which is the vast majority of the population. Are they going to say, "Well, I can't find myself"? Do they have to? Do they have to? Climb Mount Everest to get there? Uh, well, I'm curious. I have no answer to that.
So other folks might find it through ballet or through writing or through construction. I mean, you think about other archetypal things and how they show up in society, but you think about Hephaestus, right? The builder, the creator, and that's another way that someone could feel like they're in communion with something spiritual by building things in a creative way, making tables or building, hospitals,
Hmm.
or you think about um, oh gosh, I can see his statue and I can see his the rod of Asclepius, the Greek god of healing. You know,
Right.
other people might be marked to be healers or and so I think that all of us could see all of our work. Anyone could see their work as being some expression of something archetypal that's calling them deeper into life.
I
That
see.
even being a
Yeah.
doctor could be deeply wounding or even a ballerina that one day you do this thing that you're out there dancing and one day you get old and you can't do it anymore and that I think that as veterans we get stuck in this trap that only we know what this is like and only we know what war is like, but everybody has their own unique ways of being wounded.
Yeah.
It's just very it's I think we have a war is kind of unlike anything else. It's definitely the great separator, I think.
Yeah.
But
You just triggered a thought. It's interesting that the stories of Jesus are he's a carpenter.
Hmm.
I mean, I never thought about why did we decide he was a carpenter? I mean, we have no idea what his job was, but we decided he was a carpenter. It's just interesting.
it is. Yeah.
So, this one's a little deep, but I think it brings a lot of perspective and it could bring a lot of help to people. But the burden of command is something that is very powerful. And those Marines are yours to command. I mean, you were a platoon commander at 23 years old, and you know that you're going to be sending them into harm's way. Um, you know, and that is a burden that you, as the platoon commander or company commander or even battalion commander, only only understand. But how have you handled your burden of command after so many years, given that it's something that does never go away? And what advice would you give to others who have faced and will face the same burden?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I have had to struggle with. Uh, you fuck up. I mean, like I was really exhausted once we were at the end of a long op and set in on a hilltop, and I went to sleep instead of inspecting the mortars. And the tripod that holds the mortar up against the base plate was loose, and we got hit that night, and we called in our own 60 millimeter mortar fire on our outpost. Well, after the first shot, that mortar changed positions because it had a loose bipod, and we hit three of our own guys.
Oh,
Yeah, ooh, and for years, it was like if I just wished I just inspected that mortar. Oh God. Uh, I mean, another one and this is in what it's like, but I had my radio operator was a really smart kid, and I made him a squad leader, and uh, we were taking Hill 484, and I knew what the enemy was going to when they left the hill. When we finally took the top, there was only one way for them to go, and I told Thomas, I said, "You set up with a machine gun, and when they come down that finger, they're going to come down that finger, and I want you to kill every one of them." Yes, sir. So he takes off. Well, we we hit the top finally, and the enemy started. They never ran. The NBA were good fighters. They were very orderly retreated, but they were going right down where I knew they were going to go, and my blood was up. I was just I wanted to just kill him, and so and Thompson wasn't in position yet. And God damn it, Thompson, they're going on the hill. I was on the radio screaming at him, and so he's a good Marine. He was moving undercover in the jungle, and he said, "Well, I'll move faster outside of the cover." And he took his squad outside the cover, and I saw three RPGs, and it killed him and another guy. Break. Um, to this day, it's like, why didn't I just let the NBA go? I mean, why didn't I just let him go? Jesus Christ, I killed Thompson and Break because I got my blood up. So those are the things that, when you're in command, that so how did I deal with that? And it took me a while. I had guilt, and what I've come up with, and I don't know if it's bullshit or not, but I think particularly Marine infantry officers are expected to be perfect, and they themselves expect to be perfect. As long as you have a standard of perfection and you fall short and you don't give up the standard of perfection, you're going to feel guilty. I mean, I think guilt is the sense of I don't know, unquiet in your own psyche that you didn't live up to your image, your self-image. Well, a self-image of being perfect is totally fucked up. And so I had to say, yeah, I was tired. I wish I wasn't, and yeah, I was tired, and I didn't inspect the mortar around, and we got hit that night, and that wasn't my fault, and yeah, we did this, and yeah, I was responsible. I was responsible for that. I did that, but I'm not perfect, and I'll try to do better next time. And believe me, if when I'm tired now, I think about that. I think, well, you're not that tired, so I mean, I learned something from it, and I don't feel guilty about it. I feel bad about it. I feel sad because we lost a couple of kids, and the same with Thomas. I mean, I feel bad. I talked to his sister just a couple of years ago, and
Mm.
I told her the story, and she didn't shout at me or scream at me or anything. It was just like we were in a horrible situation, and I I got bloodthirsty. I, I'm quite human, you know, and uh, and I had an experience of talking to Thomas in my mind, and
Mm.
and what he said, and I said, "I'm sorry that I did that, and I killed you." And he says, "Shit, Lieutenant, I was a Marine. I wanted to kill him too." I mean, it was just his voice, in my
Hmm.
head, but it was like, yeah, yeah, he was a Marine. He wanted to kill him too, and so for people that are worried about this burden of command, yeah, you gotta try to be perfect, but you aren't going to be perfect, and I
Yeah.
think that when you fall short, you accept it. I
Yeah.
fell short. I fell short. I wish I hadn't. As opposed to, oh, I never should have fallen short because I'm perfect, and it's an impossible standard.
How long did it take you to come to some of those realizations?
About 30 years. Yeah, I know. It took a while.
For the record, Carl, so you started that with this might be bullshit, I don't know. But from the therapist, I would say it's absolutely not bullshit. And what you just said is actually really kind of the key with these kinds of losses, and all the time when I'm working with folks, but veterans especially, I mean, it a lot of the questioning and the guessing and what ifs, and I there are some things that I had a really, I mean, a thousand what ifs. I mean, I'd what if myself crazy over a few things that I didn't do. And um and at the end of the day, we have to recognize that's one of the stages of grief. It's bargaining, you
Yeah,
know, and that surrender, it's like that old Buddhist wisdom, just to surrender. Um, and I'm not a Buddhist, and but I'm fond of some of those teachings, and at some point, I think a lot of veterans, it's kind of contrary to our nature to surrender and just say fuck,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. I
I'm
feel
not
sorry.
God. There's no way I could have known. I did the best I could. If I
Well,
if I
it's
could
not
have done
even you
better, I
did the
would have done
best you
better.
could. I think
Yeah.
it's you failed.
Yeah.
So what? You
Yep.
know, welcome to humanity.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It
accept it.
Yeah, no, I mean on another plane, it reminds me, and it's kind of unrelated, but in a sense, like psychologically related in a sense. There's a gentleman by the name of Lanny Basham. He wrote a book called With Winning in Mind, and like all the competitive shooters know what most of them know what this book is. And he went to the 1971 or 1972 Olympics to try and win, got a silver medal, beat himself up over it.
Mm.
Went to a sports psychologist, be like, I failed. How do I get better? And the psychologist told him, well, the first thing I'm going to do is teach you uh, to think that you didn't fail, because I mean that's a astronomical achievement. And he's like,
Yeah,
well, that
only
didn't
the
work for me.
second best shooter in the world.
Yeah, and he so but he came back, and he came up with this whole mental management system to where it's like replicating the same thing every time to become perfect, absolutely perfect. Went back to win the gold medal at the next Olympics and everything, and he helps people all in that sense. But it's coming to grips with that you are not perfect, that you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to make far more mistakes trying to achieve that perfection before you actually do get to perfection. And in the line of war, you're never going to get perfection because it's a human element that you're fighting. You're never going to
Yeah,
be able to
not
outsmart the enemy every
that's
time.
right. And that enemy is trying to make you fail.
Hmm.
Yep.
You know,
Just like
it's
you are
not like
doing
it's
the same with them.
yeah, yeah.
Yep. And the fates play advantage. I think about all the random shit that happens in war and all the times where people just barely survive or end up killing, just the freak accidents and you know, the crazy unexpected shit that happens. You know um and we still blame ourselves even when this crazy shit we couldn't control happens, but we
Hmm.
have a fancy word for how we deal with those losses by internalizing it, and it's called introjection. And basically what it is this idea that the bad thing that happened out there must be the result of something bad in here. And it's kind of a convenient and in a way a healthy trade-off, because if we believe that the problem resides in us, then if I just fix myself, maybe I won't have to suffer this terrible loss again. And people that do that end up being, healthier people in a way, but it's a double-edged sword, because you can be really reflective, you can learn, you can grow, but also folks who do this a lot tend to end up being the most depressed, the hardest on themselves, uh,
Mm,
their own biggest critics.
Well, I remember after after I came back from Iraq in '05, I got out for about 6 months, and I felt guilty. Like the guys I went over to Iraq with, they were back in Iraq. And I'm hearing stories, and I'm hearing that friends are dying, and like there was a huge level of guilt that was going on internally. And so I decided to go back in the Marine Corps. And I did. And I internalized a lot of things, and for years there, I wouldn't get close to anybody because I never wanted to suffer the type of loss that I did whenever I went in '05 and had friends get wounded and killed. And it took years. It wasn't really until 2016, when I was a platoon sergeant, I had one of my squad leaders come up to me. He was like, "Staff sergeant, like, can you talk to me about what it's like to go to war,
Mm.
and your first firefight and all this stuff?" And I hadn't realized it up until that point, but I didn't really talk about it. I used some of my experiences lessons, but because that's what a good platoon sergeant does.
right.
But I never really talked about some of that stuff or even opened up about it with anybody. And once he asked that question, kind of a light bulb went off, and so we sat down and we talked, because ultimately he's a squad leader. Then he's going to be in my shoes as a platoon sergeant.
Yeah,
He's going to be a gunny. He may be a master sergeant, and
right.
those are lessons that he can learn from through me that are ultimately going to make him better. And so then it turned into me only talking to Marines about some of my experiences, and
Mm,
in 2017, I just gotten over to Bahrain, and I had a gentleman by the name of Ajax Trueblood who happened to be in Iraq the same time I was in 2005. And he was writing a book called Bastards and Brothers.
Hmm.
And at first, I didn't know what to think of it because he started to ask me some of these questions, and I never talked to any civilians about my experience. And I sat on it for a while, and then I finally got back to him, and I opened up, and the book came out pretty damn good. Brought him onto the podcast, and in a sense, it was me regaining my humanity by being able to open up and talk about some of this stuff with people.
Yeah. I'm reminded of a friend of mine who lost his dog when he was 9 years old, and he loves dogs, but he'll never get another dog because he's going to lose it. And I'm just thinking that's a really stupid way to behave, you know? Yeah, the
Yeah,
dog's going to die, but you're going to be without a dog your rest of your life. You know what's
yeah.
wrong? I mean, it's amazing. You know, Adam, you must know this. I mean, how humans just trap themselves in these dilemmas that we just sort of,
I've done it.
yeah.
I've done it. You know, it's not fun feeling pain,
Yeah.
Hmm.
but yeah, we can just choke the life right out of ourselves, really.
But the last question that I have, Carl, and I think there's a lot of correlation between Vietnam and Afghanistan, but in Vietnam or Afghanistan and Iraq, but in Vietnam we picked up and left, just like Afghanistan and Iraq, and to many in the global war on terrorism era, we feel as if the sacrifices that we made were for nothing. Given that the situations in leaving the war zones were very similar, very political in nature, and the feelings are much of the same, what would you tell those who fought and lost so much given the circumstances as departing Iraq and Afghanistan the way we did?
Yeah. Well, I think that a couple of things that hit me. First of all, what we talked about, which is that if you're going to try and make meaning out of it, then you're going to have to look inside and make it yourself.
Yeah.
Because and the thing is that the people who are in charge are human,
Hmm.
and sometimes they really make mistakes. And the trouble is that when you're that high up in the government and you make a mistake, I made a mistake as a platoon commander and I lost a couple of people. I mean, if you make a mistake as a, Secretary of Defense, you lose thousands, I mean, but they're the same poor dumb human, And I think that what happened is that we got ourselves through bad judgment into some really stupid wars. Like I tell people, I say, I'm not anti-war at all. I'm just anti-stupid war. And and I think you just have to accept that. It's like, yeah, again, that's just like the Buddhist thing. It's like that's there it is. I mean, that lovely old Marine expression. There it is. It's just reality. You got stupid people up top making bad judgments, and I think that once we entered, we went after Osama bin Laden. Should have done that. That was a good thing. He skipped across the border to Pakistan. We should have come home. I mean, it was like we missed our opportunity, but no, well, we already got the special forces there. We already got oh shit, the Marines are there. Okay, let's just keep, well, why don't we change the government? It's that uh, hubris, ego, stupidity. I mean, never assume a conspiracy when stupidity will explain it just fine. But um, so I think what I would say is you have to just accept that I think that a mistake was made, and what you got out of it was um, very important and very special. And just because the American foreign policy failed, that's not on you. You did your best, and it's on them, and let them struggle with it. Um, you just why should your meaning be dependent upon some stupid bureaucrat?
Hmm.
I mean, that's what you're doing. Oh, well, this war should have been fought differently. Well, it wasn't fought differently. It was a dumbass idea. And so don't make, I don't want to feel bad because they made a mistake. Just it was a mistake, and I was involved in it. And I just reminded again. I wrote about it in a book. It's like I was talking to Joseph Campbell. It was a great privilege, and he got drunk and I got drunk. It was really wonderful. And I was telling him about the thing about Thomas, and he said, "Well," he said, you feel guilty about that, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And he said, "Look," he said, "Oh, I know what it was. It was a Vietnamese kid that I'd killed up front and personal. I mean, I shot him, you know, about, uh, 8 or 9 feet away from him, and I looked him in the eye, and he said, we're born into the world of opposites. You had no uh, control over the fact that you were born in Oregon, and that kid was born in North Vietnam, and the machinations of the universe put you against each other, and you ended up coming out of it, and he didn't." And he said, "You have no control over any of that except one thing. Did you do it with a noble heart?
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's what your control is. Did you do it with a noble heart? And you get put in a mess, and I believe that Afghanistan, Iraq, and Vietnam were all messes. Did you do your bit of it with a noble heart?" And a lot of people didn't. A lot of people, made their careers out of it, and a lot of bad shit went on all the way down the line. That's what you have to face. Did you do it with a noble heart? And I think I can accept that I did. I generally, my heart was in the right place, trying to help my platoon members and then my company members. And um, anyway, yeah, don't give your meeting over to some bureaucrat.
No,
Carl,
I
sorry, go ahead, Matt.
no, I think that puts things into perspective. I wouldn't have been able to explain it like that. I haven't even thought of it in that sense. It remind me of, we went to those wars under George Bush Jr. And, for better or worse, whether people liked him or not, I really don't care. He was our president at the time. I was in the military. I was following orders. But one thing I really got, like, watching him after he left the presidency, that I really commend him with is he took those losses and that burden with a heavy heart. I mean, you could just see how much he had aged after
Yeah,
he left the presidency. And he did a lot of good for the veteran community once he had left office. I mean, something simple as he learned how to paint, and then all his paintings he auctioned off, and donated toward the veteran community and building a system that helps veterans. A lot of
great.
what we
I
have
didn't know
today.
that. Good on him. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, he did a lot because of a heavy heart.
Yeah,
yeah.
And
those
that
paintings are something.
yeah, I mean, that's huge.
Carl, I have to know how you met Joseph Campbell.
I was on a business trip, and I was in Oakland, California, in a hotel. And so I went down to the bar. It was down in actually, it was in the basement of this hotel.
You are shitting me. You met him randomly?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, this isn't like at a conference or something. You met
No.
Joseph Campbell
Yeah. I
randomly.
walk into the bar and I look down the
Oh,
bar, and there he is. And I go like, okay. And this is like when you see the beautiful girl, at the mixer, and you go like, oh God, I don't know if I should approach him or not. And I thought, um, so I said, well, I girded my loins and I walked up to him and I said, "Mr. Campbell," I said, "I've read your books. I just really admire your writing, and I just want to know if I could, buy you a drink or something." And he looks at me and says, "Hell, I'm Irish, aren't I?"
oh my gosh. What year was this?
This was probably in the early '80s,
Oh
mid
my
'80s.
gosh.
Yeah, and
What a moment.
it was not only that, but we got drunk together. I mean, we drank
That
more than one whiskey.
That is one of the coolest stories I've ever heard in my whole entire life. I was a Joseph Campbell scholar at Pacifica.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, I was one of
Yeah.
the scholarship recipients. But yeah, I mean, I have a bunch of pictures on my phone that I cherish from being in the Joseph Campbell Library there at Pacifica. Um, and one of the coolest experiences I've ever had was holding one of his copies of Young's books.
Yeah, with
And
the annotations. Yeah.
yes, the notes in the margins, and you can actually see I was holding his copy of On Psychic Energy, and in the column he's writing about um, basically the withdrawal of psychic energy and the descent into the unconscious of the hero's journey. And so it's like I'm holding this book where you can see Campbell having these key insights around his own theories with mythology. And it's like
Yeah.
this is was he was holding it like this, reading this, having these, world-changing revelations. It's the coolest thing in the world. So
Pacifica has all of his stuff, right?
all of it, yeah. James Hillman's stuff, Marion
Oh, really?
Woodman's, Maria Gimbutas, who was a very famous, did a lot of research on goddess figurines in
Yeah.
ancient Europe and
Which
beyond.
which I've heard has been kind of
Yes.
just she didn't get it right, but
Yes. Yes, she missed some of it. The body of her work is still there's a lot of impressive stuff there, but there's more to the story.
yeah. Yeah.
But man, it's that's such a cool story. I can't believe you ran into him at a hotel bar. That is unreal. That's like two stars colliding. I mean, what are the odds of that? Uh,
Yeah. No, it was a blessing. It was a blessing.
oh my gosh, that's awesome. Well, I'm curious. One of the things I've wondered, and after reading your books and seeing what a big role writing played, just in you telling your story and how you express and what it's like to go to war, that that book was your song, is kind of how you put it.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm curious what role writing played in your recovery.
Um, yeah, it was a big part of it. And I, I sometimes call it controlled flashbacks, because when I'm writing, it's sometimes like those two books in particular. This it got very vivid, and sometimes I literally would end up with snot running out of my nose onto the keyboard. I mean, I would be just that taken up, and uh, I had a friend, Joe Bobro. He's in the union
Yep.
circles. You know him?
He was one of my professors, and he said the same thing to you that he said to me. You and me have never talked about this, but I saw you do another interview where
Turning ghosts into ancestors.
yes, he said that to me when I was having a panic attack one day. I was
Yeah.
on the ground, bawling, crying, having a panic attack, and that's exactly what he said to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he's absolutely right. And what I tell people is that the writing, instead of I mean, ghosts haunt you, right? Ghosts are inside your unconscious, and that's what gets you into bar fights, and that's what gets you into drugs and divorces because you haven't. Those ghosts are deep down in there, and they're haunting you. You got to get them out in front of you, and the writing. Got all that stuff in front of me, and so it's no longer a ghost. He calls it an ancestor, and you turn your ghosts into ancestors through all kinds of methods. I did it by writing. Some people make songs. Some people just talk to their wives. I mean, it doesn't matter, but it can't be inside. It's got to be out where you look at it. You'll never change. I will never be able to change the fact that I shot this kid 6 feet away from him and watched him die. I will never, but because I wrote about it and I got it in front of me, I can look at it and say, well, that's part of me, but it doesn't haunt me anymore. I don't know, I can't explain it, but
Like a
it's
different relationship with it.
a
Like,
different relation. That's it. A different relationship. It's out in front of me instead of inside of me, and it's still me, but it's just different. And yeah, I love that expression of his. I always try to give him credit. I
yeah.
wish I didn't. I wish I made it up, but I didn't.
Whenever I saw the interview where you shared that story, I was like, man, it felt very special to me.
Of course, yeah. I
Because
had no
I
idea.
didn't know that you knew him, and so I was like,
Yeah,
"Oh shit, Carl knows Dr. Barbaro,"
yeah,
and I was like, "Oh my God, that's exactly what he said to me when I was having that panic attack that day." But yeah,
yeah, yeah.
really
Interesting.
special. And I want to be respectful of your time too, but I'm sure I know Matt and I have had a few conversations before, and anytime I do one of these podcasts with Matt or with others, I always hear about veterans that are going through a hard time, and then they hear this a podcast, and they say, this is what I needed to hear right now, to help me figure something out. And I'm curious if you'd be willing to share a little bit about your breakdown moment and your breakthrough moment. I know
Mhm.
you probably had several of those,
Yeah.
but if you could just share something that might help somebody else come to terms with what they're going through.
Well, yeah, there were a lot of bad moments, but talking about my personal sort of like when did I hit rock bottom kind of thing. Um, I was unemployed, had four kids to support. My marriage was falling apart. We were no longer sleeping in the same rooms. Uh, I would, get up in the middle of the night if I heard a sound. And I would run out of the house naked onto
Hmm.
the street to try and see where the enemy was. And my wife just thought I was going absolutely crazy. We'd never heard of post-traumatic stress.
Hmm.
And I remember uh, being in a park, and I had seen a guy named Larry Decker. He was in one of these veteran outreach centers. And I started talking to him. And what he told me, he says, Carl, he says, I've never seen anybody overcome post traumatic stress without a spiritual component. And that somehow hit me. And I thought, wow. And so I was in this park, and everything had fallen apart. My marriage, I had no job. I mean, I thought my kids were going to starve. Uh, uh, I was a wreck with the symptoms. And there was a church on the other side of the park, and I walked across into the church. It was empty. And for some reason, I got in front of a statue of Saint Teresa, who I never knew anything about. I mean, I didn't I've heard the name, And I started talking to her.
Hmm.
And there with tears running out of my eyes. And I think that conversation with Saint Teresa um, started me on the other path, and I met David Bona, who I think taught at Pacifica, but he was a Capuchin monk when I met him, and
Hmm.
he and I talked about spiritual stuff, and he was the one that did. I call him Brother Dave, brother. Anyway, I can't remember what name I gave him, but he was the one that led that mass for the dead, and that was so getting into this spiritual journey started in that park when I didn't know where to go, and I went and talked to a statue, but it wasn't a statue, was it? And and I it's just I think that was probably the big turning point. And then I got into the VA system, and I got some great therapists. I, Corky Sullivan and Sharon Rapp, Larry Decker, who was a
Wow.
head of the Sufi order in America. I mean, he's an
Wow.
incredible guy. Uh,
I've got one of his books.
yeah, yeah. The Alchemy of Combat.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, he was my therapist, and you know, just
Wow.
started working with him, and then I got meds. I mean, I still take meds. My startle reactions are still awful,
Hmm.
and I got a new wife. We've been married 20 years. So it just started coming up. My kids all love me, and I love all my kids. And even my ex-wife, we didn't know it hit us. I mean, just we'd never heard of post-traumatic stress. So,
Yeah.
um, but that was the bottom. And I have to say that it wasn't like it was a religious conversion or anything. I my view, I'm sort of like, people say, what's your religion? I say, I'm sort of like a Buddhist Hindu Christian. It's sort of the way I see it all. But it was that spiritual moment when that started me going on the other direction,
Hmm.
and the therapy and the medicine, and then it starts to build on itself because I got better. My relationship with my kids got better, and I ended up finding a wife that understood me. And
Mm.
I tell you another story. I love to tell this story. She has a sense of humor about post-traumatic stress. I mean, I would do stupid things like take out cupboards with my fists. I mean, it was just pretty bad. So, and this was only a few years ago, so I'm still suffering with it, or I still have it. I don't know if I suffer with it, but I was coming in with a couple bags of groceries in my hands, and the front door was closed, and I had to, bump it with my shoulder. And my daughter had put that little chain that goes across the door, and so I bumped it with my shoulder, and it went like that. Oh God, I threw the groceries up in the air and I hit that door with my fist and screaming at it and everything. And then of course my fist started hurting. And my wife peeks out through the crack of the door and she says, "You didn't take your meds this morning, did you?"
So
And then it all just went away. It was like her humor just, yeah, what the fuck? You're fucked up. Okay, we got to make dinner now, and it was so different from my first wife, who was like, "You're crazy. I'm going to take the kids to my mother's," and I'd feel guilty and everything. My wife now, Ann, she just, "You didn't take your meds this morning, did you?"
yeah, I love that reaction and how it's kind of like not a reaction in a way.
It
It's
Yeah,
diffuses
right.
everything.
a really beautiful, yeah, it's a really beautiful way of holding it. Just, you know,
Yeah, watch Carl be crazy, and it's not Carl, it's the war,
yeah.
It's just he's acting crazy, but it's not me, you know.
Yeah. By the way, Carl, I don't know if you know this. I think you might, but or you know some of this, I think, but the ceremony for the dead. So you wrote about the ceremony for the dead. You kind of pass that on and what it's like to go to war.
Hmm.
There's 5 organizations I know of that do some version of like a 5, 6, 7 day retreat
Hmm.
that all use the ceremony for the dead.
Oh, really? I
Yep.
heard of one, but
Yep.
that's yeah.
Yep. So we do it at the Battle Within. In fact, I'll be doing it this upcoming Wednesday. So we have a 5 day cohort coming up for the Revenant Journey for the Battle Within that starts Monday next week. And
Great.
on Wednesday, that's kind of the descent into the abyss, of the
Hmm.
hero's journey. And we'll start out the day with the ceremony for the dead. And we have a fire. We created a fire pit down at the bottom of this hollow and in the woods, and we all walk down there. We have the fire going, and all the guys write letters, and we hold it in lots of different ways. And I think anybody listening could do this at home on their own. But we light a fire and set the stage, and we let folks know, that this could be an opportunity to address, the actual dead, whether it be folks whose lives you've taken or friends that you couldn't save. It could be people that uh, you knew about whose losses really affected you. It could be about the people you didn't get to say goodbye to.
Yeah.
Maybe even the dog, your childhood dog. That was my story. Is man, one
Mm.
of the hardest parts was my childhood dog. I got in my first fight because of that dog, protecting my dog when another kid kicked it playing football. And but yeah, I said goodbye to him the day I left for Iraq and never got to see him again. It's still one of the hardest parts about the whole damn journey for me. And they could write also about parts of themselves they feel like they've lost. That maybe
Yeah.
there's the kid in them that they felt they lost, or their innocence that they lost, or maybe it's about a part of them that they feel like they needs to die.
Yeah.
Maybe there's an alcoholic in there that needs to let go. And so they all write letters, and when they're done, we say a prayer, and that prayer includes the line straight out of What It's Like to Go to War. You know, God bless these dead, who were hurled against us by the same forces that hurled us against them, you know.
Yeah.
And we read your words to close up the prayer. And then
That's
one by one, they either share their words, or they can just keep them to themselves, and they burn those letters in the fire. And it's one of the most special moments of the week. Over and over and over again, have people tell us that it was a big moment for them, you know. And so I want you to know your impact. I mean, most of these programs would not exist had you not written that book that inspired it, as kind of a war detox.
mhm.
Nobody'd be doing the ceremony for the dead.
Yeah.
And we've over 1,000 warriors, I think, have probably done it because of our program. that we started here
Wow.
in Kansas City.
Good for
Um,
you. Yeah.
and then I know several other organizations, Save a Warrior's done probably close to a couple thousand, I'd guess by now,
Mhm.
over the decade they've been at work. But all these organizations together, I wouldn't be surprised if we're on our way to 5, 6, 7,000 warriors who've all done that ceremony because of you. Um, so you've made a
Thank you.
big impact on us, and all of us are so much better off because of the work that you've done. Um, and we're very fortunate to have, you kind of holding the light in the darkness, for us to find our way back.
Well, yeah, one of the hardest things was to be honest. I mean, there were things that I literally wrote them down, and then when I'd read them the next day, I'd say, "This is bullshit. You don't think this way, or you didn't do that." And having to claw back my own ego and say, "Just be honest." That's hard. And I think that's comes through in the books. I think that this guy is he's just saying, and I think people relate. And
Yep.
that's thank you for sharing that with me because it makes me feel good.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah. Like Hemingway said, I can't remember exactly how Hemingway said this, but right, hard and honest or something like that,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
and that definitely comes through in your books.
yeah. Thank you.
But Carl, can't thank you enough for everything you've done for me personally, and then for every veteran that I know has been touched by your work. We're very, very grateful to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam. Well, and thanks for
No,
having me on.
no, absolutely. I appreciate you coming on. I think this was great, and I would love to have you come back on because I know there's more questions that Adam and I would both love to
Yeah,
talk to you about.
yeah. Do you guys do this together all the time, or is this just a one off?
So me and Adam, we talked back in, I think it was November. Well, we did our first interview in November that we
Hmm.
released, and then November, December timeframe, I was like, Adam, I think it'd be really cool if we did one episode a month on this podcast that focused on mental health because I don't
That's
think it's
great. Yeah,
talked about enough. And
yeah.
so that's kind of what we're doing now, and we're doing a chapter a month of his book. This episode's going to be kind of taking place of chapter 3, which is the land of the lotus eaters, but that'll come out in in March now, and
Okay.
Odysseus and the Oars 10 chapters, so
Yeah,
we have more room, and I mean if we do more episodes and release them off schedule, I'm completely fine with that. But no, these are meaningful conversations for me. Um, and people enjoy them. I was at work this past week, and I was talking to a couple coworkers. I was like, I have Karl Marlantes coming on, and one of them had no idea I did a podcast. And he's relatively new, retired lieutenant colonel, really nice guy, solid individual. And he's like, "You have a podcast?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "What's it called?" I told him, "Bullets and Bourbon Podcast." He's like, "Well, I have another one to add to the list." And he's like, I dig what you're doing. Like that, the large majority, like whenever I first started doing this, it was like, how is this going to be taken? Like, are people going to enjoy this, or are people going to get something out of this? And like, it's that whole like internal conversation that you have with yourself,
sure.
like
Yeah,
how are people are going to view you as at the same time. And at the end of the day, it's like, well, I really don't care because I do this more for my enjoyment and to talk to people, and this is my form of therapy as well. And people are like, we don't talk about mental health enough, and
no,
how important it is. I was having a conversation with Colonel Como, who, he's an absolute legend, in modern day Marines, just extremely intelligent individual. I was telling him about this as well. He's like, he's in huge agreement. Like this is the type of stuff that needs to be talked about.
yeah, yeah. Well, good for you guys. That's just really good. All right.
We're able to
But
have these conversations in large part because of you, Carl.
Well, thank you.
So
Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
but
been a
no,
great pleasure. I'm,
absolutely.
I know you guys are up late, and my wife was giving me the hand sign. I'm late for dinner.
Well, no, I don't want to take up any more of your time, but thank you again for coming on. Adam, I
No, it's
really
great. I
enjoy.
enjoyed it very much. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But to the listeners, thank you. We hope you enjoyed this, and we look forward to next time.